Now, I saw this at work last month when I went down to do a story on the border. The border with Mexico specifically, although I think we need to start thinking more about the border with Canada, because there's a lot of private programs in the United States that are explicitly aimed at both. For instance, Boeing's virtual fence. Do you remember reading anything about this? A couple of years ago, Boeing got a contract that could be as much as $2.5 billion when it's done, to build a virtual fence over huge swaths of the border, both with Mexico and with Canada. Now, in the election, there are very few sort of bipartisan consensus issues, but one of the ones that all the presidential frontrunners agree on is that more technology to secure the border is the way to go. So Boeing's virtual fence is a great example of this. I went down to visit the pilot project. It's called P-28, 28 miles of rough landscape in Arizona, where Boeing has put up the first stage of its virtual fence. And basically what they did for hundreds of millions of dollars, over budget and way over deadline, was throw up 9 or 10 towers, surveillance towers. And they're just bristling with antennas of every imaginable kind of sensor, from video and radar to thermo imaging and seismic stuff and audio and streaming. And the contract was really to create a command software architecture to integrate all of these different methods of surveillance over this high traffic border area and allow like one person sitting in an office anywhere being fed by all of these feeds to monitor the border in all of these different ways at once. So we went to this community and we talked to people who live under these surveillance towers. And they said, well, first of all, it's like my daughter's bedroom is right there. I don't know, would you like a bunch of guys sitting in this room like all night just looking in your window? So there was that level of reaction. And the other thing that they told us was that for all of the money and sophisticated technology, unfortunately, Boeing's virtual fence can't actually tell the difference between a coyote, the human smuggler, and a coyote, the desert animal. Because they get fooled by wind and water. And in any event, this pilot project came to an end. Millions and millions over budget and many months over time. And the Department of Homeland Security announced it a stunning success. And, if you think about it as an actual, let's leave aside the issue of immigration and the fact that that issue can never be addressed until you deal with the economic forces that are forcing people north and that are opening huge numbers of crappy low-wage jobs in the United States and transforming the manufacturing economy into a service economy. Okay, forget that. We can't even talk about border security in a way that makes any sense unless we see clearly that it is a stunning success when the object is to transfer public money to Boeing. It's worked brilliantly for that. When it actually comes to its stated goals, it's been a bit of a disaster. Then we went from there to Potrero, California, another frontier in the badlands of privatization, where Blackwater, the world's most notorious mercenary firm, well known for massacres and really aggressive behavior in Iraq, has proposed a new military-style training facility. So they brought this old chicken ranch 8 miles from the border with Mexico, big 824-acre ranch, and they have a proposal in to build a massive training facility. Now, Blackwater's already trained 100,000 law enforcement officials at federal, state, and local levels in the United States. They're one of the premier law enforcement training outfits, and they want in on the border market. So they proposed this new training base that'll have like a 10,000 square foot armory. They've got a driving track. They want to have a helicopter pad, housing for 300 trainees at a time. They've got a 50-foot firing tower, 4 ship simulators, 11 firing ranges. They want to have a live fire shoot house and an urban simulation training area, which means a mock Iraqi village or a Mexican pueblo where they can train in house-to-house searches and commando warfare. Blackwater's now selling surveillance blimps with the big Blackwater paw logo on it, clearly directed at the border market. And they've opened a new intelligence division. Blackwater's intelligence division is called Total Intelligence Solution. It's headed by a former CIA, a bunch of former CIA and defense intelligence officials. The chairman is Cofer Black, who is the former head of counterterrorism at the CIA. Cofer Black is well known for his role in rendition, in harsh interrogation techniques, AKA torture. I'm in Canada, I'm allowed to call it that. The so-called black site prisons, places where people like Maher Arar have been taken to be tortured. Cofer was the architect of a lot of that, and now he's running Blackwater's private intelligence service. And their mission, according to Cofer Black himself, is, quote, to bring the skills traditionally honed by CIA operatives to the boardroom. So you have this massive mercenary firm now selling private intelligence services. There's another frontier that Naomi's identified, and I think many of you are familiar with it, so I'll just give you one specific example, and that is disaster response. Now, there's this little company called Sovereign Deed, which has set up shop in northern Michigan, that's pitching itself as the world's first privatized disaster relief agency. You know, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency in the United States, the people who couldn't find the Superdome when New Orleans was flooded. Hell of a job, Brownie. Heck of a job, Brownie. They want to be a privatized FEMA. So they went into this tiny little, you know, and these examples are instructive because these are the front lines, and these are where the battle lines actually are. They're in small communities. That's why I told you about Potrero. That's why I want to tell you about Pellston, Michigan. It's a village of 771 people. And this big fancy guy, Cofer Black, former CIA counterterrorism, they show up in town. They buy this little regional airport. They wine and dine the local counselors and planners. They convinced the county to throw in $10 to $13 million in new roads and infrastructure to support this little regional airport. And they're going to launch this private disaster response center. They're backed by Richard Rainwater, who's this like Howard Hughesian kind of reclusive bajillionaire, friend of Bush. And they get Richard Mills, who's a former brigadier general from the United States Army. And they're going to set up this country club model of disaster response. And basically they say, look, we work for the government's not going to save you next time. But for only $50,000 membership and $15,000 a year, when the next disaster hits, whether it's an earthquake, whether it's a terrorist attack, whether it's an avian flu, we'll be there with water, we'll be there with medicine, and for a little top up to our premium club, we'll airlift you and your family out. And then the final, I think really the final frontier in the United States anyway, is the notion of fully privatized government. I'm going in a few weeks to do a story on Sandy Springs. Sandy Springs, Georgia is a rich white suburb of Atlanta where the gated community folks got tired of paying their taxes into a tax base that supported a large, poor African-American community. And they separated from their county. They sort of declared independence, they arranged the vote, they got out, they incorporated themselves as a city, and then all of a sudden they realized they had no city infrastructure because they left it all behind in Fulton County. So in steps CH2M Hill, one of the most notorious contractors in Iraq, builders of the leaky jails and police training facilities where unmentionable stuff drips from the ceiling. And for the starting price of just $27 million a year, CH2M Hill is building a complete city administration for Sandy Springs, Georgia, from the ground up. It's America's first contract city. You know, I'm wary of the extreme example because I can tell, you know, and I feel this way sometimes myself. Well, oh God, it's just hopeless. It's all so surreal and sci-fi and crazy. But you know, I think if you do your homework and you research these things and you put this to people as the end game, then we can really mobilize people to say, we don't want to go there. That's not a hard sell. Now, you may have an entire government which has drunk the Kool-Aid of P3s. And it may be, you know, it may be heresy in Alberta to question P3s and their obvious rightness. And that's a debate which has been carefully constructed and well-funded and well-strategized over time, and a culture and a language which has been built. But if we can identify the trajectory and talk about where it ends, then all of a sudden the conversation about P3s is happening in a different environment. And I think that's our challenge.